Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out. My name is Jacob Hyman. I am the leader of Strongtown Steubenville. Some of you may have heard of Strongtown Steubenville. I know a lot of familiar faces in this room. Thank you for coming. Actually, just a bit of a background on myself. I have been in Steubenville for the past 4.5 years. Originally from South Florida, I made my way to Ohio when I was stationed in the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. When I got out in 21, I was a bit rootless and desiring somewhere to land. And I had become friends with some of the people who'd been doing some of the downtown revitalization in Steubenville. I visited a few times and called this place home in May 16th of 2021. I started this local group of Strongtowns about 2 years ago. And what we are is one of 300 local chapters of a national nonprofit which is committed to helping communities improve through grassroots revitalization efforts. We are in conversation with people in Portland, Oregon, all the way to Houston. There's even a group in Africa, I learned, that just got started, and Uganda that just got started. But yes, we've been around since 2023, where we've done a number of different civic engagement activities, which is sort of boiled down into 5 different areas, and just want to give a bit of a background on what some of those things have been. Most notably, you might hear about us as the bike people. We certainly are the bike people, but that's one of the things that we do. We do monthly community bike rides on the 3rd Saturday of each month. That means this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Fort Steuben. We want to see the Market Street Bridge rebuilt, and we want to see it with a bike ped access, and this is us with a video with the Rails to Trails Conservancy did promoting the work that's going on in the county and the region to maintain that infrastructure. Additionally, Civic and Neighborhood Pride, we engage in activities of this. This is the intact staircase that is at the end of Bellevue Boulevard. In the summer, we did a community cleanup of that. We're going to be doing another community cleanup come this fall. You might have the most immediate familiarity with us through our Substack, where each week we go to Steubenville City Council and we take notes on the proceedings of that meeting, and then afterwards we go to Leonardo's and get ice cream and talk about our town, what we care about, the things that we want to see, and the things that we love about it. We also focus on downtown redevelopment. We ask questions about downtown parking, how much parking is in downtown Steubenville, how well do we utilize that parking, all for the aims of trying to make downtown a business and family-friendly place in the current state where not everybody lives downtown but wants to get downtown. And then we also do just wild and whimsical things, such as building a wooden model of the Market Street Bridge for the 2023 Sights and Sounds of Christmas Parade. We've also made a nutcracker of the gentleman who's about to come up and speak. We do all of these revitalization efforts it's revitalization efforts, and that already presupposes or says that there was life here, something happened, and we want life to come back. So what happened? And that's a question I've asked myself since I moved here, since I'm not originally from here. It's all been learning and talking to people who have been here. And professionally, I'm a civil engineer, and so I love looking at maps. So I looked at old historic aerials. And I know it's a little, not as bright, but this is a historic aerial from 1954 of our downtown. This is the south end, a lot of the workforce housing for the mills. So I'd like, if you could, even though the screen is small, to try to look at a building. Like pick a building, and don't tell anybody who it is or which it is, but look at a building. That's your building. I'll give you a few more seconds. Hopefully everybody has a building. Okay. So put your hand up if your building disappeared. So what happened? Why did our buildings disappear? Why did the things that we built get knocked down? I've lived in Steubenville long enough, and also having not been from here and having traveled around, I've seen the problems that we have here repeat themselves in other places across America. And when we're busy solving them, or at times being taken aback by them, it can be hard to think about how to improve, or that we're the only ones stuck with these problems. And what I do believe is that the problems that we have in Steubenville are uniquely ours, but that they're not unique. And that's what the speaker that we brought here tonight, I hope, is going to be able to show and help us understand our own situation in Steubenville in a larger context of many communities in the Ohio Valley, but also communities all across the United States. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker for this evening. Charles Chuck Marohn is the founder and president of Strong Towns, a nonprofit movement launched in 2011 to help communities across North America become more financially resilient, livable, and sustainable. He's a licensed engineer and land use planner, and Chuck began his career designing municipal infrastructure when he saw how conventional suburban development patterns created unsustainable long-term costs. Out of that experience, he was writing, people started listening, and then in 2011, the nonprofit Strong Towns was born. He is the author of Strong Towns, A Bottom-Up Revolution to Rebuild American Prosperity, published in 2019, which, thanks to Bookmarks Bookstore, we have for sale in the back. And if you entered our raffle, at the end of the night, we'll be raffling off three free copies. Chuck lives in Brainerd, Minnesota, with his wife and 2 daughters, and we're grateful to have him here. I'll give it to you, Chuck.
Thank you. Thank you. That is very kind of you. I've been telling Jacob for a long time now that I really wanted to get here badly. I don't, you might have some inkling of this, but Steubenville, like the name, is a really big deal outside of your city. When I told my kids I was going to Steubenville, they're like, "Where, Dad? That's so amazing." And I'm like, "Steubenville." And they're like, "Yeah, but where?" My kids have gone to Steubenville, the retreat. Like the last 4 or 5 years, they were in Denver and Dallas and Chicago this last summer. So there's a little like Catholic Disneyland about coming here. That's pretty cool. So thank you for making it happen, and thank you for coming out. I maybe should start by saying just a couple things, and then we'll get into the meat of it. I come from a small town in central Minnesota, Brainerd, Minnesota. We were a lumber mill town. We were a railroad junction town, so we had a big rail yard that employed thousands. We had a big paper mill that employed thousands. And, you know, my grandpa was a foreman at the mill. My dad worked at the mill for a while. I had an uncle that worked at the mill for many, many years. I had another 2 uncles that worked at the rail yard. All those places are closed. They closed when I was a kid. And so my city went through the whole kind of downward decline of disinvestment. We generally lead the state in unemployment. And by lead, I don't mean have the lowest, I mean have the highest, pretty much. There's a neighboring city of Baxter, which is actually where the family farm that I grew up on is. The 2 cities abut each other. Baxter is the highway bypass of Brainerd. So they have the Costco, the Walmart, the Taco Bell, the Arby's, all that stuff along the highway strip with the frontage roads. And Brainerd is the old railroad town. That's where I live today, in the heart of Brainerd. I say this because in the early parts of my career as a young engineer, I was involved in building all the new stuff, all the big projects. I did work on the bypass. I worked on the development along the bypass. I worked on running sewer and water projects to new developments. And I was doing this in my hometown. Understand, my wife and I met when we were in junior high, dated all through junior high and high school and college, which was great, but it was a weird conversation to have with my kids when they got to that age. But you met Mom when you were 15. Yeah, okay. Doesn't work that way always. But I came back to my hometown, my wife and I did, and got married, and really was vested in my place. And it took a number of years of doing projects that I thought were making my city stronger and better and more prosperous for me to recognize the damage that was actually being done. So I want to talk, I'm gonna show you a lot of my city, and then when we get done, I want to talk about your city, because there's a lot of, to me, overlap and familiarity here. This is actually my hometown. This is Brainerd, Minnesota in 1870. I'll give you a planning degree in 10 seconds. The further west you go and the further south you go, the less cities were developed when we got to the end of World War II. When we got to the end of World War II, we started building cities in a completely different way. And so what you see, the further you go east and the further you go north, so the northeast being kind of like one end of the spectrum and the southwest being the other end of the spectrum, you have a very different development pattern. One where in the northeast, our cities were very, very mature, and then we tried to change them after World War II to become something else. And in the southwest, you have cities that were just tiny little blocks that were torn down, and now you have this completely new development pattern. And as you go further that way and further that way, you see more and more of it. You all are unique because you're further east than I am, so I'm showing you something that would have happened decades earlier in your place. And the maturing I'm going to show you now, you guys actually reached a higher level of maturity before we started to tear things down. This is my hometown in 1870. And what you see here are these little pop-up shacks. Some lumberjacks showed up here. They cut down the trees. They planed them out. They threw up these cheap buildings. And what they were really hoping was that more and more people would move to this place and the place would become more successful. This is kind of like an initial hope and a dream, right? Every city that was ever built in all of human history started out just like this. If it was founded before the Great Depression, it began like this. A little hope and a dream about what could possibly happen, and a bunch of people trying to make the best of it. Most of the places that were founded like this actually never got past this phase. They just failed. They didn't thrive, and nothing happened. But the places that did, what you would see is that people would start to move to that city. More and more of these little buildings would go up. And then all of a sudden, the land would become more valuable. Even when the buildings started to fall apart, people would replace them with bigger buildings. And over time, you get this development pattern that grows incrementally up, incrementally out, and then matures and thickens up in place. So after 30 years, this street looked like this. This is the same exact street, just a generation later. And as my city continued to grow, incrementally up, incrementally out, and then thicken up, these 2- and 3-story wood buildings would eventually be placed with buildings of brick and granite. You all reached another maturity level beyond this, right? The next level of maturity actually is what you see in a lot of your core downtown, because you got started ahead of us. I have people who say, well, Chuck, this is a really cute story, but you know, real cities aren't built this way. And I say, well, yeah, they actually were. I found these photos here of a city you might recognize. This is actually a square. In 1878, here's the same one 20 years later. Here it is in 1911. You might start to recognize it now in 1918. I don't have any intervening photos, but that, of course, is Times Square. This is the way that humans assemble their habitat, and the way we've literally always done it until the present time. And I think it's important to recognize what we are doing and why we do it this way. I'm going to tell an analogy here about my family. This is Chloe Grace Marohn. That's my firstborn. And I love the fact that there's some kids here tonight. It just makes me really happy. When kids are born, right, they're beautiful, they're perfect, they're wonderful. They get this first little smiles, and it just makes you, yeah. I was explaining to someone the other day who's about to have a baby. I'm like, you know, when my kid was born, I loved my wife this much, like the max. And then my kid was born, and like the Grinch, my heart grew like 3 sizes. I didn't even know I had this muscle to love something that much. This is what this kid was, right? What else is this kid, though? She cries at night. She wakes you up. She has, you know, you got to change your diaper all the time. She spits up on you, so your clothes have all... There's all these things about babies, even though they're beautiful and they're wonderful and they change your life, they're just like, oh, someday we'll grow out of this and life will be so much easier because if I can just get a night's sleep, if I can just, you know, make it. So then what happens? They do get to this next phase, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful, she's so precious, She does all these things now. She likes to sit and color, and she talks to Dad, and we do fun stuff, and it's all great. But then what else does she do now? She insists on putting her shoes on herself. If we're running late, she doesn't care. She'll throw a fit in the middle of the store. And you're just sitting there going, I love this kid so much. She's amazing. But she has all these things that, like, I hope she grows out of at some point. And what happens? She does grow out of them, right? And in each phase of growth and in each phase of development, what we find is that there's absolute beauty and just like wonderful things happening. But there's also like maddening stuff that goes on. You're just like, oh my gosh, can we just fix this thing? Can we just get on to this next thing? This is what life is about. This is what maturing is about. And I think if each of us look inside of ourselves, we recognize that, each day is a struggle to become that better person, that better version of ourselves. And if we step back and we look at our children as they grow, we can see all that love and joy and the things that we think are amazing in each of these photos, right? But if we're not overly nostalgic, we can also understand that getting to each phase of this development took a lot of work, took a lot of patience, took a lot of energy. There is a lot of joy in the journey, but the journey is really important. So let's go back to the city. This is the infant version of my hometown. The people who were here were so excited about its potential. They thought, we're here on the ground floor of a place. Someday it could become the next, fill in the blank, whatever their vision and dream was. They're like, I'm going to build my little part of it. We're all kind of working on this together. But they also, I'm certain, said, I hate this mud in the street. And the fact that I got to go to the bathroom in a hole in the ground behind the building, and there's no running water. I mean, all these things were annoyances that they would have loved to have gotten rid of. They eventually did get rid of them, right? They got rid of them when they got to this phase, the next, like the toddler version of a city. And they're like, if they were around at the beginning, they were looking at this going, oh my gosh, we solved all those problems. But what do they have now? They had a whole slew of different problems that they were dealing with. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, if one building goes up in fire, the whole city's going to go down. We really, really need a water system. Now we need a sheriff. Oh my gosh, there's all kinds of stuff happening here. The latrines in the back smell really bad. This street is a little bit better than the one we had before, but it'd be really nice if it was paved. Look they took care of those problems. Now they got a water system, they got electric lights, they've got drainage, so they're getting rid of that. Now what are their problems? I don't know, taxes are too high, do you see what I'm saying? Each of these iterations grew and matured them to solve a problem of the past. And here's kind of the point I want to really drive home here. Each of these steps was essential to learning the things that were necessary to be successful in the next stage. Each of these steps was part of a process of discernment, a process of figuring out who they were, a process of making this place unique to their people and their place and their time in a way that created a strong city, a strong community, a strong place. Here's what the street looks like today. It is a collection of half-occupied buildings and parking lots. This picture is taken roughly from where this picture was taken. There's a circus parade going through town here in this photo. This is taken from up in a window. I took this one from on the ground, but in the same spot. So you can kind of get a sense of what was lost. I'm an engineer, and so my first real realization of this change was this, and I want to share it with you as kind of like a benchmark for our conversation. In this little stretch of street, these 2 blocks right here, there's $500,000 of public infrastructure investment. You add up the road, the sidewalk, the drainage system, the water, the sewer, the electric, $500,000. Where is the wealth that we as a community are going to tap into to pay to maintain and sustain that public investment. That wealth used to be there. It used to be there in spades. It's not there anymore. I've heard a number of people say here tonight that we in Steubenville have been waiting for Daddy Warbucks to come in and make some big investment and save the day. I can tell you that that rings true with me because that's been our mentality too. We have kind of accepted a long, slow decline with the kind of hope that someone would come and fix this for us. There's a growing realization in my town, there's a growing realization in your city that we are the people we've been waiting for, that no one else is coming, that if this place is going to get better, it's going to be us who does it. Let me ask you a question and shout out the answer. This is not a hard question. Complete the sentence. The thing that got us out of the Great Depression was? World War II. Okay. Those of you that didn't say it, you were thinking it, right? This is what we're taught in junior high, right? The thing that got us out of the Depression is World War II. Let me state this in a longer narrative. We were in deep, deep economic turmoil. 25% plus unemployment. So 1 out of 4 working age people did not have a job. Lots of housing foreclosures, lots of dislocation, huge, huge economic turmoil across our entire country. And the thing that rescued us from this deep, deep economic hardship was a global war where tens of millions of people died and our young people had to go across the sea and kill others or be killed themselves. And everybody else was drafted into producing the implements of war, the ships, the planes, the munitions. We were rationing meat, we were rationing butter, we were rationing gasoline. And our economists tell us that this is the thing that brought us prosperity. I point this out because we live in a world dominated by the thinking of economists, and it's not helped us. Because of course, no one would call the war period, and my grandfather was a Marine in World War II. He was the first wave into Japan after the atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. He was the first one into Nagasaki after that. He would not talk about it. This was the most traumatic time of his life. The idea that the bean counters who look at economic statistics would say, hey, good times are here again because we have GDP growth is kind of absurd. I point this out because 2 things. First, we live in a culture dominated by the thinking of economists. And the thinking of economists was shaped dramatically in this century in this country during the Depression and the immediate post-war period. As the war was winding down, the economists around FDR started to panic. This is actually a quote from a memo that Paul Samuelson, one of our last century's probably most important American economists, sent to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He said, if the war ended suddenly, there'd be ushered in this great period of unemployment and industrial dislocation greater than any economy has ever faced. In other words, if the war ended today, you might think that would be a good thing, Mr. President, but it actually would be really bad because then we would just slide right back into the depths of the Great Depression. Is that what happened? No. What happened is we started a different project. What happened is we took all of that industrial might that we had built up. We took all of that capacity. Understand, at the end of World War II, we were the only major industrial power not decimated by war. We literally had all the world's gold. They sent it to us for safekeeping, and then we just kept it because they all owed us money, right? We had more oil coming out of the ground than Saudi Arabia. We had lots and lots of land. And we had a young population that had been through a decade and a half of horrible hardship. And what we did is we took all of this capacity and we turned it loose on our cities, making our cities into machines of growth. If we could just put the components in place, we could make our cities grow and grow and grow. And by doing that, we would create a massive middle class, we would create widespread prosperity, and we could grow our way out of our hardships. Just like the war had grown us out of the Depression, we could keep that going without war, creating this broad general prosperity. And here's the thing, it kind of worked, right? I like to point out, and I hope you'll be generous with me because we are very much not a partisan organization. We try very hard to even talk about things in ways that are approachable for everybody. But I'm going to tell a story about the 2016 election because it was such a dramatic one in our lives. If you remember back to the 2016 presidential election, we had two 70-ish year old candidates at that point in time describing to us the future for the country that they saw. One of those visions of the future was Ozzie and Harriet type families and blue collar jobs. The other vision of the future was a federal government that could be expansive and generous and do big things like a new round of interstate highway type construction, expanding Medicare, Social Security, and other safety net programs. It's important to recognize that both of those visions were describing their kind of cherry-picked reality from their youth, the couple decades after World War II, when we did all of that and more, when everything seemed easy and everything seemed like very, very possible, right? I apologize, I'm an engineer, so I like charts. I don't have very many in this thing, but I'm going to show you this miracle that happened after World War II. So this is our growth in GDP, so gross domestic product. This is our growth in the economy in the 2.5 decades after World War II. Explosive. It's never been repeated since. This is absolutely astounding levels of growth. At the same time, here's the growth in our public debt. So understand that at the end of the Great Depression and the end of World War II, our public debt was at levels that we had never experienced to that point before. It was massive. Our debt to GDP ratio is like an economic indicator of how indebted as a country we are, was at record levels. But for 2.5 decades, we grew our economy at historic rates without really growing our public debt all that much. And what that did is it allowed that debt to GDP ratio to come back down to really, really healthy levels. This is the economic lesson that every economist wanted to learn and did learn. And this is the economic lesson that we as a country have just broadly accepted. It's the same mentality that says, what got us out of the Great Depression? World War II. Which is saying, what got us out of the Great Depression? Growth. What got us prosperity and built a middle class and did all these great things at the end of World War II? It was economic growth. If you listen closely, even now we're having this debate. Yesterday the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates 0.5 percentage point. And if you've been listening to the president fight with the chair of the Federal Reserve for the last few months, it's been about how do we lower interest rates to get growth going again? Because we have all these economic problems and we need to grow our way out of them. What is often not talked about in this part of the story is what happened with private sector debt. I guess I didn't put that part of the chart in, that's okay. What we saw at the end of World War II is that, yes, public debt did not grow hardly at all, but private sector debt grew by over 1,100% in the same period of time. And what we see is that when we get into the second generation and the third generation of this expansion, we see public debt start to go exponential. We see private debt start to go exponential. And we see cities start to not only have deep economic problems, but actually show major signs of decay and decline. Let me walk through what this looks like on the ground, because it's quite dramatic. And it astounds me. You know, here in a place like Steubenville, where the population is less today than it was at the end of World War II, the story I'm going to show you right now is still going to be relatable to you, which if we think through, that's kind of bizarre. This is a map of the city of Fresno, California. Remember when I talked about the Northeast and the Southwest? This is the Southwest, so this is kind of the pure growth place. So I'm going to show you this because it tells the American post-war story, I think, in the most dramatic way, although you'll see echoes of it in my city and in your city. This is the boundaries of Fresno, this yellow box, in 1897. And I want you to watch how this changes over time. So here's 1909, here's 1922, here's 1934, the middle of the Great Depression, and then here's the end of World War II. Remember, I showed you those pop-up shacks growing to those other 2- and 3-story wood buildings, then replaced by buildings of brick and granite, that incremental pattern growing up and out. That's what's going on right here. That's that historic pattern of development that you would have seen in cities all around the world, happening for thousands and thousands of years. That's what was going on right here. And you can see, even during the Great Depression, Fresno continued to grow, albeit slow and incrementally, they continued to grow. Now we're at the end of World War II. We want to turn cities into machines of growth so that we can boost our economy, not go back into the Great Depression, create lots and lots of jobs and economic growth and opportunity. And here's what we get. 1958, here's 1970, here's 83, 95, and the last one I've got is 2010. I'm from Brainerd, Minnesota. At the end of World War II, Brainerd, Minnesota was 14,000 people. Today, Brainerd, Minnesota is 14,000 people. We are 10 times the area. So, same number of people, 10 times the amount of road, 10 times the amount of pipe, 10 times the amount of space to patrol as a police officer, 10 times the amount of the area to provide fire protection to, 10 times the amount of parks and all that kind of stuff. That's where we're at today. This is data that I got as part of a team I was on. I was advising and trying to help in Lafayette, Louisiana. I'm going to show you a map of Lafayette in a little bit, but for now, let's just look at this growth data, because Lafayette, in terms of American cities, is a post-war success story when it comes to sheer growth. At the end of the war, they had a population a little over 33,000. Today, it's over 120,000. It's grown 3.5 times. But we can go back and look at the maps that they had at the end of World War II of their water system, and we can see that at the end of World War II, it took 5 feet of pipe per person to provide drinking water to the people of Lafayette. Today, it takes 10 times that amount. We can look at things like water hydrants and say, how many hydrants did it take to provide fire protection for the people of Lafayette, Louisiana? Well, at the end of World War II, it took 2.4 hydrants per person. Now it takes 21 times that amount. So while they have experienced incredible rates of growth, yes, they've also experienced increasing levels of liability. In fact, accelerating levels of liability. It takes more and more and more to get that next increment of growth. I'm going to pause here in what I normally say with this slide and just point out that when you're a city like mine and you do the same thing, but you don't have population growth, what you're just having is this be zero, right? The same, with 10 times more pipe to take care of and 20 times more hydrants to take care of. Now, do this and make this negative. And you can see that the numbers start to not add up really, really quickly. I want to show you what this looks like on the ground, because, and let me say this, because I don't want to be taken incorrectly here, because I've talked a lot about growth, and a lot of it was because I spent time at Akron today, which is a very triggering place for me. I love Akron. I've spent a lot of time in Akron. And when I say it's triggering because it is a very, very poor city that has spent an inordinate amount of money making itself poorer. And an amazing amount of effort and resource making itself poorer. I want to show you what that looks like in my hometown. This is a neighborhood that we platted out right before the Great Depression. This whole neighborhood here is like the second neighborhood developed in the city. I live in the original development. My office is like 2 blocks from here in the old junior high school, where, by the way, that's where I met my wife. I actually have an office down the hall from where I met my wife. Yes, my kids say that's dorky. And I live about 6 more blocks that way. But this is the next neighborhood over. I went to school in this neighborhood. My mom grew up in this neighborhood. My grandmother lived in this neighborhood when I was a kid. I want you to look at these 2 blocks and note that they're the same size, they have the same area, they have the same amount of public infrastructure investment. As a city, as a community, they cost us the same amount of money to provide ongoing service and maintenance to. But they're developed very, very differently. This block on the left, this was built in the 1920s. As my city was growing incrementally, this was the next increment of out. And so what you're looking at, remember those pop-up shacks from the 1870 that I showed you? This is the 1920, you just nodded. You are so beautiful. I think you are amazing. Thank you you're paying attention more than anybody else in here. I noticed. You remember those pop-up little buildings I showed you, right? This is what the people in 1920 would have built, the pop-up buildings on the edge of town. So what you're looking at here is the cheapest building that someone would have built on the far edge of the city. All 3 of these blocks here were built in the same way. And what the people were hoping at that time is, if we're on the edge of town, this is the cheapest land, we're going to build a cheap building. But if the city continues to grow, as it had been, the city will continue to grow out. We will, by comparison, be closer to the middle. Our land values will go up. We will gain some equity. And this little building someday will get a 2nd story, a 3rd story. We'll tear it down and rebuild something. It will become that wood 2-3-story building. It will eventually become that building of brick and granite. And this is how you start with nothing and end up with something. This is how people build wealth in a community. These were built in the 1920s, and then what happened? We had the Great Depression, we had World War II, and then we turned cities into this machine of growth so we could grow, and we skipped right over this and we started building out on the edge. And ever since, we've just been building out. These blocks have stagnated and declined. The city labeled this whole area blight. And we eventually got this block torn down and rebuilt with a Taco John's. Jacob, Taco John's in Ohio? No. We have not made it this far. All right, the Imperial Taco John's has not made it to you. I noticed Dunkin' Donuts has made it here. We survived without Dunkin' Donuts for a long, long time, and now we got our first Dunkin' Donuts in my town last year. And apparently we're getting a second one, which that just seems obscene to me. Taco John's will make it here someday, I promise. You can think of this as Norwegian Mexican food. So I believe there's a market for that here, no? Here's the thing to recognize about this building. This building is a drive-through franchise restaurant. This met all of our zoning codes. It's got the right amount of parking, it's got the right setbacks, it's got the right amount of green space proportion, the floor area ratios are just right. It met all of our building code, right? It's got commercial sprinklers, it's got ADA compliant bathrooms, it meets all the building code stuff. The bike walk advocates showed up and wanted them to put in a sidewalk, which they did. The sidewalk ends right there, but they got that stretch. Even the environmental group showed up and had some things to say. They wanted some natural plantings in the stormwater area. So they actually built a little ditch back here and put some weeds in it. And now we've got, natural stormwater. Let me just say, everybody was happy about this. This checked every box. We got rid of blight. We met all the codes. We met every party that came to the table was happy. They put this on the front cover of the economic development brochure at the end of the year. Look what we did. That old blighted block has a value of $1.1 million. Add up all those buildings, the barber shop, the pawn shop, the liquor store. These are not high-end places. I'm not arguing that they are. They're really, really cheap, but add them all up, $1.1 million. The Taco John's, same area, same amount of public infrastructure investment, same cost to us as a community to provide service and maintenance, has a total value of only $600,000. Understand what you're looking at. You're looking at the traditional pattern of development, the way we have built cities for thousands of years. When we walk out this door and we walk around for these blocks, you're seeing that style of development. This is in its infant phase, and it still outperforms by a wide margin the stuff we're building brand new today. And here's the incredible thing. If we look at this and we say, how many jobs are here? It is vastly more than what you've got there. When we say things like, how much local ownership do we have here? It's local owner after local owner after local owner. And I went and interviewed them, and I said, where do you bank at a local bank? Who does your accounting? The local accountant. Where do you advertise? In the local paper. In other words, these are the people who are part of our ecosystem. They employ that next level of white-collar workers that are the lawyers and the accountants and the bankers and what have you. That's our ecosystem. That's the people who are here. These are the people who put floats in the 4th of July parade. It's not the Taco John's. Now, I don't have anything against Taco John's, right? I like Mexican, Norwegian food. But the ownership here is out of town. The profits here leave our community. They don't bank locally. They might have a local bank that they bring their money to and then ship it out somewhere. But someone else is doing their advertising package for them. Someone else is their corporate attorney. Someone else is their corporate accountant. That whole other layer of things is missing. So not only are we devaluing our literal community, but we are robbing ourselves of so much more. Let me point out one last thing about this. If we went out today and said, we want to make this block more valuable, we want to increase the opportunity here. We want to make the property values here go up. We want to just increase the capacity of this block. You and I sit down at a desk, could come up with 100 little things we could do that would make this better. Plant some trees, put out some benches, sweep up the sidewalk, put some awnings on here, paint up these buildings, reconnect the sidewalks to the neighborhood so the people who live 2 blocks away can actually walk there in safety, instead of having to either walk in the street or drive and park here with cars going 50 miles an hour right next to them. There's a whole litany of things we could do. Ask the same question about the Taco John's. If we wanted to make that property more valuable today, what would we do? There is no answer. There is no answer. Because they don't want another building in their parking lot. They want the parking. They're not going to put 3 drive-through lanes instead of 2? I mean, we can only eat so much food, What you have here is a development pattern with tremendous upside potential and very limited downside potential. This is after a century of decline. It still outperforms that. This is a development pattern with limited upside potential and a downside potential that can literally go negative. We've all seen these places. I've seen these places in your community today, right, that were built 30 years ago, and they've been turned into what? This one will become a used car lot at some point. There'll be a new Taco John's up the street. After that, it will be boarded up, and they'll be asking for some type of grant or subsidy to get it torn down and redeveloped. We've all been here. We've all experienced this. We've all witnessed it. There's a group out of North Carolina called Urban 3, and they're most well known for their productivity mapping. Actually, the guy who founded it and runs it is a guy named Joe Minicozy, and him and I are speaking at a conference together at Disney World on Monday. And so tomorrow, we're going to have breakfast here in the morning, and then I'm going to record a podcast, and then I'm driving to the airport, and I'm flying to Disney World. And I'm meeting Joe, on Saturday, and we're going to ride rides and have fun for a day before we get back to work. If you think of a farmer spreading seed on a field, the parts of the field that grow up the most vigorously, that's the part you would say has the highest productivity. It's where you get the highest bushels per acre. Joe's team has asked the question, where do we get the most value per acre? Where's the most productive part of a city? I start with Buffalo, New York. Buffalo, New York is one of these cities that 100 years ago was not only one of the wealthiest cities in the US, it was one of the top 5 most wealthy cities in the world. It's astounding levels of wealth. And if you go to Buffalo today, you will see a lot of decline, a lot of neglect that will look very familiar to you. But if you scratch the surface, just like if you scratch the surface here, you see that vestige of enormous amount of wealth that was there. That's in Buffalo. So if we step back and we say, where in Buffalo is there wealth today? What we see is it is in that traditional downtown. It is in those neighborhoods that were built before the Great Depression. It's in those places that had reached a level of maturity before we started to build in this different pattern. This is Buffalo's core downtown. And not only does it financially outperform, today hold its value, it is way, way, way more productive than everything that we built subsequent. This is a pattern we see repeated over and over and over again. In cities big and small, in cities really all over the world now, this modeling has been done and shows a very, very similar pattern. When we have pre-Great Depression patterns of development, when we have places where people can walk from place to place, when we have places that were built in this kind of traditional DNA, what we see is that they have tremendous financial potential, even when they are occupied by the poorest people in the community. And the further we go out in time then, what we see is that the financial productivity drops and drops. This is Lafayette, Louisiana. And it looks a little bit like these maps, but this map is fundamentally different, and that's why I used a little bit different colors with it. This is a map, you can think of this as a profit and loss map for the city. Joe's team was invited to go to Lafayette, Louisiana in 2015 and help the mayor and the staff answer the question, why is our city broke? We've had decades and decades of growth. We've been doing everything right. We're an efficient government. We keep taxes low. We keep growth going. Why are we broke? Why do we have a $50 million backlog of road maintenance that's going to take us 30 years to untangle? Which, by the way, today is over $120 million of road maintenance backlog. That's going to take them something like 85 years to catch up on. Why do we have this? Joe invited me to come with and help solve this problem and figure this out. And what we did is we looked at every income stream the city had, and we mapped them all up. Where's your revenue coming from? And then we looked at every ongoing expense the city had. We mapped those up, and we said, where are all those? And at the end, we had about 36 different maps, and we mashed them all together, and we got this map that you can think of as a profit and loss map for the city. Every place where you see blue is a property that is paying more in taxes and fees to the city on an annual basis than they cost annually to provide ongoing service and maintenance. And every place where you see red is the exact opposite. These are places that cost more to serve and maintain than they're actually paying in taxes and fees. And the higher the line goes, the more the disparity is, right? So you've got the core of the city, the core downtown. You've got this crescent of blue through here. Those are obviously the original neighborhoods of the city. This is the core downtown of Lafayette. Remember I said the further west you go and the further south you go, the less mature it was at the end of the war. Lafayette is very south, So they are a lot less mature than you were as a city. They had gotten basically almost in the toddler phase of downtown development. So their buildings are one story typically, there's a few 2 stories, nothing really monumental. That's their core downtown. It's not that great, right? This is the Shotgun Shack neighborhood on the edge of the downtown. It looks poor, it is very poor. These are both struggling neighborhoods. Yet, when we step back and we look at where's the city making money, where's the corporation of the city actually have their revenue come from, it's from these neighborhoods here. Let me make one point too, so we're on the same page. Our analysis took like road maintenance and said, all right, you've got to redo this road at this cost every 25 years. Our analysis assumes that the city goes out and actually does that. The fact that they don't do it in the poor neighborhoods means that that disparity is even bigger than what I'm showing you on the map, okay? So what are all these red neighborhoods? Well, that's the malls, the strip malls, the big box stores, the franchise drive-through restaurants, the windy, curvy, cul-de-sac streets. That's what that stuff is. In the city of Lafayette, when we did this analysis, the median household made $45,000 a year. They paid $1,500 of that in taxes to the city. In order for the city to take care of everything that they have built, the median family's taxes would need to go from $1,500 a year to $9,200 a year. 1 out of every $5 the family makes needs to get sent to the city just to maintain roads, pipes, hydrants, parks, buildings, stuff they've already promised people they will fix and maintain. Is that going to happen? No. So what happens in Lafayette and what happens in every city across this country is that annually city councils make decisions. What roads are we going to maintain? What roads are we going to let fall apart? What pipes are we going to take care of? What pipes are we going to let rot? What neighborhood are we going to make good on our promises? And what neighborhoods are we going to let fall away and decline? You might have arrived at this destination earlier than most places because you not only did the crazy growth, chasing the sugar high, like everybody did, but you also experienced population loss. And so those 2 factors kind of drove you to the same destination that everybody else is moving towards. You're not uniquely bad, uniquely different, uniquely dumb. You didn't do anything that everybody else didn't do. You just had a different set of circumstances that made it more real more quickly. I talk about Detroit at the end of the chapter 3 of my book. And I say in there, Detroit is really the model that we've all followed. In the early 1900s, Detroit was on its way to becoming the Motor City. And they were the first city to really build in this style. Let's have commuter suburbs where people would drive in. Let's tear down buildings in order to make that happen. Let's really drive down property values by expanding the city dramatically. It changed the entire nature of how the finances of a city works. And Detroit has been the first city to really reach the end destination. When we look at Detroit, Detroit is just 2 or 3 decades ahead of everybody else. My mom was reading my book when it came out, and she called me up at the end of chapter 3, and she's like, Chucky, this is a very sad book. And I said, hang with it, Mom. It gets better. It does get better. Because while we've created for ourselves a terrible predicament, there are many, many, many things we can do. Oh yeah, I forgot. I threw in these happy graphs. We started something this year at Strong Towns that we've been trying to work up to for a long time, and we finally had the capacity to do it, something called the Finance Decoder. Let me give you a 30-second version of this. Cities budget in cash every year, but they take on massive long-term liabilities. If you are a city, and let me give you an absurdity. We have seen cities where they sell their city hall for cash to balance this year's budget because they budget every year in cash. And then they lease City Hall back over, in a definite period of time, or they'll sign a 100-year lease or whatever it is to lease City Hall back. So what that does is it closes your budget gap in year 1, and in year 2 through 100, it gives you a payment that you have to make. But you solve this year's budget, right? Those kind of trade-offs happen all the time in cities. City budgets, because they're cash budgets, are largely smoke and mirrors. And I don't say that to disparage cities. I think we need to give cities more tools. One of the tools we're trying to give cities is a long-term perspective on their finances. And so we created this tool called the Finance Decoder. And what it does is it takes the city's financial report, which it's about this thick and nobody reads it, and it puts it into 8 charts that actually describe the trajectory of the financial health of the city. This chart is net financial position. It's a accumulation of all the city's cash deficits over the years. And so what you see here is each year the amount of future revenue that is needed to pay for past spending. Ideally, this would be flat or going up because you would be in surplus. But every city that we have looked at, and again, it doesn't, New York City is billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, excuse me. But I mean, it doesn't really matter what city. We see the same general trend in all of them. A steady downward negative net financial position. I show this not to dig in, but just to reiterate that we're all in the same position. I often get asked in these presentations, who's the city that's got it figured out? And the answer is we all did the same thing. Every city has followed the same path. Every city has developed. We all have the same zoning codes. We all have the same building codes. We all finance housing and commercial properties in the same way. We all have the same tax structure, the same tax system. All these things were standardized so that we could make our economy more efficient. We don't have anybody who's different. So I can point to you different things that places are doing that are kind of unique and cool, but we all basically follow the same playbook, and we're all in the same position at the same time. Let's talk about what we can do differently. And I really want to talk about ways for us here to think about things differently, because we talk about that idea of, the daddy warbucks coming in. Someday a big corporation will come in and find us really desirable. I think there's something very sad about clinging to the notion that there's someone better than us who will come in and do for us what we're incapable of doing. It is a very it's us having a very low opinion of ourselves. And I see this in my city. It's interesting, and Jacob, I know you've only been here a few years. I hope the city recognizes the energy that you bring. What I have found in my town is that a lot of times it takes someone new from the outside coming in to see things that we are, incapable of seeing. I met a woman today in Akron, and I had said something in my talk that really angered her. I talked about a project that I had experienced when I was there in 2018, and she didn't change my mind, but she had a lot of passion about it. And the passion that she had came from decades of heartbreak in her city. And I recognized the heartbreak that she had, and I told her, I said, if you ever come to Brainerd, I will take you around town and you will look at it and see all the potential, all the possibility. You will see all the wonderful things. And I will share with you my agony and my heartbreak. Because I remember where that movie theater used to be that's now a parking lot. And I remember going and watching Star Wars there, and now it's a parking lot with a barbed wire fence around it. And I remember the beautiful bank that used to be there, and the depot building that used to be there, and all the things that used to be there that are not anymore. And so sometimes it takes someone coming in who doesn't have that hurt to be able to see the potential in the things where we see a lot of pain. let me give you, I really have two things that I want to give you to help us get started. The first one is this recognition that the way you start every journey is with a step, right? A single step. Oftentimes we make that first step really, really hard to make. We have to lower the bar of entry and invite more people to participate in building our city. This is actually the step, the path to prosperity. Let me show you what this looks like. This is something that in my city we call a tiny house. My ancestors in the same city would have called this a house. For some reason, we have put the modifier tiny on the front of this as if it's like a really super scary thing, when really what this is a starter house. We can go to all the historic neighborhoods of my city, and I spent time in some of your neighborhoods today and saw very similar things, and we can see a lot of these starter houses, but they're no longer 400, 500, 600 square feet. They're 1,200, 1,500 square feet. Because what happens when you build a starter house is you get into something small that you can afford. And then you have a kid and you put an addition on the back. And then you have another kid and you put on a second story. And the neighbor comes over and helps. And you go over and help the neighbor with their project. And we build a city incrementally over time, starting with what we can actually afford. If you want to buy a house today, what do you have to do? Well, you have to be able to qualify for a 30-year mortgage. That means you have to have a stable income pattern. That means you can't have non-traditional work. You can't have someone in your household not working or at threat of non-working or not having themselves a work history. And so most people at the entry-level position have to rent for a long time. And of course, we've seen rents be squeezed and go up and up and up, so it's harder to save the down payment. When we make that entry level hard to get into, what we do is we sideline a lot of people that could otherwise be participating in building our place. We need to look at things like starter homes as part of the answer for that first rung. This is Muskegon, Michigan, and I'm going to give you the commercial version of the starter home. Muskegon, Michigan won our Strongest Town contest. We have this annual contest. Marion, Ohio won this year, which Marion is an astounding place. I was there yesterday. Marion, Ohio won this year. Muskegon won in 2018 or 2019. Muskegon is a very magical place. Again, a place that rapidly deindustrialized after World War II, tons of population loss, a downtown that was struggling, lots and lots and lots of vacancies. One of the things that they found in Muskegon is that they had a lot of entrepreneurial people in their city, but they couldn't get people to fill those vacant downtown places. Because in order to get into one, you had to bring it up to code. You had to have ADA compliant bathrooms. You had to have commercial sprinkler systems. You had to have and on and on and on and on and on. And we can talk about that later because I feel like there's cities like Memphis that have actually dealt with that to some degree. But in Muskegon, they were stuck. And they realized that, someone coming in trying to figure out how to make their business work can't also do it if they're saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. So what they did is they took an empty lot in their downtown, a place where the building had been torn down, and they bought these storage sheds. They actually call them chalets, which they painted them up, funky colors, and they rent them out to startup entrepreneurs. $75 a month. The only real requirement they have beyond the rent is that they have to be open at certain hours, and they set those collectively because what they want is they want all the people open at once because they want a lot of energy in this space. Understand what this is. This is the lowest cost option to get started. In fact, I've had a developer who does this kind of work say, Chuck, it's not the lowest. The lowest is a tent. And he uses tents to get people started. But the idea is get people started in a place where the cost of failure is really low. $75 a month, no long-term lease. Come in, try your business, fail, try your business, fail, try and fail, try and fail, try and fail, try, figure it out when the stakes are very low. If you go to Muskegon today, not only will you find these storage sheds, and they're full of life, and they're full of energy, and they're full of stuff going on. They're a super fun place with great entrepreneurial-minded people. But if you go to the downtown of Muskegon, you will see their entire downtown is full. And a lot of those businesses are people who got their start here, figured out their business, and then were able to move with confidence and a business plan and backing into the downtown. Again, when we lower the bar of entry, we invite more people to come in and help build our city. Here's the other concept I want to leave you with. This is the last thing I want to talk about. Part of that mindset of waiting for the big thing to happen, it permeates the way we run our local governments. I'm gonna say a couple things, and I don't want anybody here to take this personally, because Strong Towns is, at the end of the day, a huge advocate of local government. We treat local government today like it is the algae of government, right? Like, you've got the federal government, they're super powerful and important, and then you've got the state, and they're like, and then you've got the county government, and then you've got the algae, the lowest form of government, right? At the bottom of the food chain, local government. And we don't look at that way at all. For us, local government is the highest form of collaboration for us working together in a place. That's what local government is. When we go to most city halls today, what we see is a government structure that is set up to perpetuate this post-war development experiment, to be part of that growth machine. And so what you see is government set up with kind of the World War II military approach. We have a bunch of hierarchies. We've got a bunch of different departments. Each department has its own silo of people. We've got a head of this department and a deputy, and then people underneath them. If you want approval, you got to go here, and then you got to go here, and then you got to go here. You'll form multiple committees and layers of committees. This is the way we structure local government when we are trying to just repeat the same cookie cutter pattern over and over and over again. We are not trying to do that. What we actually need is a local government that is flatter and more attuned to what is going on in our neighborhoods. If you go into most city halls today, they will have a grant writer, but they won't have a social worker. They are going to be oriented, what we say, vertically around capital flow coming into the city. What is the state grant we can get? What is the federal grant we can get? Who's the developer that we can have come into our city and invest money? And what we need is a local government that is oriented horizontally around the struggles that people are having. When we look at the city, and we can see this all over in Steubenville, but we see this, I mean, these are from my town. What you see here is a disconnect between, and let's use very generous terms, into the service that we are trying to provide and the service that people actually need. At Strong Towns, we've created a 4-step process for making the best public investments that we can make. And by best, let's make this all about money for a minute. The lowest risk, highest financially returning investments we can make. We have created a 4-step process to do that, and it's very, very simple. Step number 1, go out and humbly observe where people in the community struggle. I'm so happy that you're here. I really am. I want to emphasize humility here. We often, and I'm an engineer, I'm a planner, let me just say, you don't go to school to become a planner unless you think you know more than everybody else. So part of being a planner is like, I have plans for the world, right? I'm talking about repressing that notion and actually proceeding with humility. I don't know what your experience is. I don't know what I'm going to see. I don't have an idea. I want to go out and actually observe what is happening in the city, with an eye towards identifying where are people having a difficult time using the city as it has been built. Step number 2 then, ask ourselves a question. What is the next smallest thing we can do right now to address that struggle? Notice I don't say, what is the biggest thing we can do to tackle this problem? I was out on the street today and we were talking about the streetscape and the things that could be done to fix it up and make it better. And one of the insights that I received was, well, the city's aware of all this, but they're waiting because they have a big streetscape project they want to do, and they're waiting to get funded. And so we will burn through year after year after year, decade after decade, life after life, waiting for someone to give us grant money instead of doing the things we can do today with the resources we have on hand to build momentum around making it better. Nothing we do today prevents us from doing something better tomorrow. But everything we do today will set us up to understand the next thing we should do tomorrow. So the idea here is to ask the question, with the resources we have on hand, with paint and straw bales and duct tape and cones and like what a little bit of elbow grease, what can we do today, not to fix this problem forever, but to make it a little bit better? Step number 3 then, go out and do that thing. Do it right now. Don't study it for 6 months. Don't bring in a consultant. Don't send it to a committee. Just go out and do it. And then step number 4 is to repeat that process over and over and over. What you will find is that a lot of the things you do won't matter. You'll think, this is a thing we should do because it looks like people are struggling here. Let's try this. And you'll go out and try it and it won't make any difference at all. But what have you spent? A little bit of time, a little bit of paint. But sometimes you'll go out and you'll do something and people will respond and it will be magical. You go, oh my gosh, I never could have figured that out unless we had tried and tried and tried. And now look at what we did. And now what's the next thing we can do? And the next thing we can do? And the next thing we can do? There's this sense of wanting to skip to the end, right? We're here. And we really want to get to here, right? But how many of us would do that? If we're given the chance with our babies, how many of us would skip to the end? There are moments, right? There are moments in our frustration where we would do that, but how many of us would do that? We dropped my youngest kid off at the University of Arizona in August, and I tell you, it broke my heart. It really did. I'm so proud of her. I'm so happy for her, and I don't want her to have any lament about me and my anguish of not having her around to talk about things at the dinner table and what have you, and I'm so proud of her. I think she's doing great things. But I'm so grateful for that time in between, right? When we skip to the end, we are doing something damaging to ourselves. We are doing something damaging to our community. We are doing something damaging because it really is in all those steps that not only do we learn who we are, but those are the steps that have all the beauty. I want to say one last thing, and I feel like I'm liberated to say this here in Steubenville in a way that I probably wouldn't say it in a different place. If we look at Christianity and we go back to the very beginning and we read the letters of Paul, what we are seeing is someone who not only was inspired, right, by a direct intercession and relationships with people, but someone who had to have looked around and said, this is insane what I'm being asked to do. This is just so daunting. I'm supposed to go around and tell people about the Savior of the world. I'm supposed to do it in places that don't want to hear this. I'm supposed to do it and start churches out of this. This is crazy. If Paul had looked at success as being, in my lifetime, we have to have St. Peter's in Rome and an international church and, 1 billion adherents and like what have you, he would have never started. He would have never started. He didn't look at it that way. What he looked at it is, this is my task now to plant these seeds, to write this letter to this group, to write this letter to this group, to go visit these people, to help these people with the next step, to figure this out, to figure that out. That's my thing. And my thing is to pass it on to the people who come next, and the people who come next, and the people who come next. There's something deeply arrogant about thinking we're going to bring it to the end. We're not. What we're going to do is we're going to make it better and better and better and hand it on to the next people. And what we're going to give them is a tool system and an ethic and a way of looking at things that says their job is to receive what we did with gratitude and thanks, and then to turn around and make it better and better and better for the next group. If I'm going to ask you to do anything, it's to just start. Start with what you have. I go around your city, and I'm not from here, so I don't have the hurt, I don't have the pain. All I see is potential. All I see is beautiful neighborhoods, amazing stuff, things that just need a little bit of love. Sweep up the sidewalk, plant a row of trees, put out a little bench, fix up this facade of this building, shake the neighbor's hand when you walk by. These are all like little things that when we do them add up and add up and add up. I want you to see a fraction of the potential that I see in your place. Because if you do, you will be absolutely blown away. Thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Are we going to give away some books? That would be beautiful.
So we are at time, but I want to make sure we have time for question and answers. But before that, we have a book raffle that we want to do first. Thanks to Bookmarks Bookstore, we're raffling off 3 copies of Chuck's seminal Strong Towns book. You can also go and purchase it in the back if you don't happen to get drawn. But Chuck, I'm going to let you draw 3 tickets. And for those who would like to line up for questions, you can do that now. You can form a line right here. So pick 3.
All right.
And you should just read them off one by one.
Okay. Oh, we have numbers.
Yeah.
Not names. Okay.
So get your tickets out.
They all have 427 at the beginning. So 427-5355, 5351, and 5361.
Can you read them again?
Yeah, 5355, 5351, and 5361. So you get one of those?
So here, you should sign it.
Oh, I will.
Yes. So hold on.
Yeah.
And which ones are the others? Or
Who gets a book? You get one? Yay. And I know I took up some of our Q&A time.
read them once more.
Oh, yeah. Which one did you have? You've got 6-1. You've got 5-5. So we're looking for 5-1 still. Yay, there we go. I know I took up some of our Q&A time. If you have to go, in Minnesota, it's kind of rude to get up and walk out. I want you to know it's not rude to get up and walk out right now, because I know we've taken up a lot of your evening, and if you have little kids and you need to go, what have you, it's cool. Like, I'm not offended. I also will do a few questions, and then I'm going to sit out there and help the bookstore get rid of the books that they've got. So please help the bookstore if you're interested. Get it there instead of on Amazon or what have you. And if you have a question, I'll sit at the table out there and sign books and talk to whoever. So please.
Thank you. My name is Matthew. I'm a recent transplant from Minnesota, so I spent a lot of time in the Twin Cities. I spent a lot of time in like Little Falls, Camp Ripley, Pequot Lake Spring.
Yeah. Okay. I was a city planner at Pequot for many years.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you for being here. Firstly, really quickly, when a city builds a subdivision or authorizes a rezoning of like farmland into a subdivision, and it can't obviously fund sort of like carry on the maintenance for all the infrastructure that goes into that, and there's like we should probably build or incentivize rezoning of another piece of farmland to make more money off of the contracts or the other stuff. That kind of sounds like a Ponzi scheme. Am I crazy? The growth we need to have more growth to fund the growth.
Did you get one of the books? If you open up the book, chapter 3 is literally called the growth Ponzi scheme. So yes, what we see is that the first generation of that new project, we can get the developer to pay for the infrastructure. We can maybe get a grant to build part of it. We might have to finance a little bit of it. But then you get all this cash flow, and the cash flow feels really good. The problem happens in the second generation when you have to go out and take care of it.
I think he has a question
Francis?
too, so I'll be quick. Could you speak very briefly, perhaps, if you could, about adaptability of structures? I'll give you an example. I grew up in Wisconsin before moving to Minnesota. There was a Home Depot that opened up for 5 years, from 2005 until about 2009 or 10, in my hometown of Fond du Lac. And since that point, that building, the Home Depot closed, and the Home Depot has remained empty and boarded up with the orange, but it's not gone, and it's been completely vacant for, well, however many years this has been now, 16, 17 years now, and no one's moving in. And there are some fast food places as well, corporate fast food chains that have closed but have not been moved in by other ones. Now, it seems like the only thing that could exist in a Home Depot is a Home Depot. The only thing that can exist perhaps in a Panda Express is a Panda Express. So adaptability of structures provides stability over long term. So maybe, trying to incentivize, creative ways to work around and find solutions for buildings that already exist that are hyper adaptable, like the strip mall, like locations that you showed from Brainerd, but also like here in Steubenville, Market Street and 4th Street, and a number of other locations, maybe even up the hill where you have row houses.
Oh, I just realized you just called the old and blighted block a strip mall. It looked kind of like it, but it's not. Those are individual buildings.
Loose terms, but you understand.
No, so the very first chapter of my book talks about adaptability. And I think it's important to point something out. If we look at your core downtown and we look at the neighborhoods around it, all of those buildings are adaptable to be multiple things, right? That old and blighted block I showed you with the Taco John's, those are all the same building, just built over and over and over again. One's a pawn shop, one's a liquor store, one's a restaurant. If the pawn shop goes away, something else can go in there. It could be a dentist's office. It could be a barber. Whatever. Those buildings are highly adaptable. Not only that, they're subdividable in ways where you can actually get small units. I've seen developers who are trying to get that bottom rung for people to get into, take a regular 1,000 square foot thing and divide it into 4 slots, giving people smaller units to get started, something that they could afford. So tremendous amounts of adaptability. If you go over to the Taco John's is literally a drive-through restaurant. And I suppose it could be a Taco Bell or a Tim Hortons or whatever, but it can't be a barber shop. It can't be it has a limited palette of things it can be. And so, yeah, I think what we have to recognize is that our ancestors, this is a Chesterton fence kind of thing. Our ancestors built cities, and they copied what they saw working. If people built things that didn't work, those people generally died or went through some type of horrible dislocation, and their ideas weren't copied. So by the time you get to early 1900s America, you have literally wisdom that was handed down to us about how to build places. And one of the key components of that wisdom is build things that are adaptable because you don't know what the future will bring. That is completely absent from what we do today. We are so arrogant in our building that we think we can build a Home Depot and that will be a good building for however long it will be there, and put millions of dollars of public infrastructure with it. So yeah, very good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Please.
Hi. My name is Ava. I'm actually a student at Franciscan University, so I don't live here, but I've been here for a year now, so I've seen kind of Steubenville, and I've dug into the history of Steubenville.
Wonderful.
So mine, it's unfair. It's kind of a 2-part question, and it's a little politically, maybe religiously charged if you don't mind. My first part of my question is, in your view, how much does the culture affect the way we see our cities and population growth? For example, like abortion and the culture of death, and the way we view marriage and the way we incentivize single parenthood. And then my second part is, how can we try to foresee or what can we try to foresee as the effects of population decline? So like what can we look into the future and say, okay, the population is declining because of things such as abortion and the different ways we view marriage, and what can we try to like plan for in this way, like in your view of the building in the strong town?
Thank you. Those are really hard questions.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry.
Let me try to give you a quick and concise answer that I think hopefully will have a bit of insight. I was on a podcast last week. I posted it on my own Facebook page. So if you go look me up on Facebook, you'll see it's like one of my recent posts. With Dr. Tom Neal, he asked me a similar question. And we talked a lot about the atomization of our development pattern. Let me give you two extremes. Extreme number one, I live across the street from the church. And the church, I live 6 blocks from the church, but let's say I live directly across the street from the church. My day-to-day existence is influenced not only by the beauty and majesty of the place, by my ability to go and be in the presence, my ability to be part of this community, but I'm also there if they need someone to help out with a funeral or bring over some baked goods or mow the yard or shovel the sidewalk or whatever it is. I'm living in communion with others in a way that kind of reinforces things that I want to bring out the best version of me. Let's take extreme number two. I live 20 miles away and I want to be a practicing Catholic, but my experience is I have to get in my car and drive to the church, park, go through the whole thing, the whole routine, and then when I am done, completed with whatever I have done, I have to return to my home, get in my car, and drive back. That latter relationship, regardless of like what's in our heart or what our intents are or what we want to be as a person, that second relationship, by its very nature, becomes way more transactional. It becomes more of a chore, more of an effort, and it might be one that we do with joy, but I think joy in the way that like Paul would call us to do hard things with joy, I don't think he meant make it really, really hard on yourself. He meant do hard things, not like intentionally make your life hard. I feel like that creates this challenge for all of us to be the best version of ourselves. I think you can take that and multiply that beyond a Catholic faith to all kinds of things in society, whether it's friendships, supporting other people, taking part in civic organizations, being a good husband, wife, father, being a good employee, being a good employer. These things are all made more difficult by this kind of isolation and atomization of our development pattern. So,
how much of that do you attribute to like the age of the internet?
To what?
The age of the internet.
I think the internet has just accentuated what we've already done. So I think that, a lot of this, it's like, which comes first, culture or what have you? I actually think that what we as humans often do is we rationalize our existence. And so I don't think the internet has done anything more than just allow us to rationalize a lot of, I'm not saying it's been a net good, but it has allowed us to rationalize a lot of things that I think if we started over again, we would have done very differently.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, so my name is Peter. I've lived here in Steubenville since I was a young kid. I love my home, and really grateful to you for coming down here to talk to us. My question is basically, so in your talk you talked a lot about like what could be done to improve the city on a city government level or by business owners or entrepreneurs. But I want to know, what can the rest of us do? There's a lot of people here like myself. We don't own businesses. We don't own homes. A lot of we're still renting. we got no kind of pull at City Hall. The police don't even seem to think we're protecting.
No, okay.
Worth protecting sometimes.
I have a very quick answer for you.
Okay.
Join your local conversation. Because like literally, we are trying to get people connected to local groups, because the answer to that question really can't come from me. It needs to come from you all working here together. And sometimes if you don't have like the idea today, you can lend muscle and support to someone else's idea, and then maybe you will be inspired in some way or connected in some way. But that's what those groups are about. They're about helping us not be alone.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you.
And this will be our last question.
Okay, last question. Go for it. Don't ask me about the internet, because I'm not an expert. It's okay. I wanted to answer that question in a way that was honest to me. I know that there's a lot of debate in society about the impact of the internet. I Snapchatted with my kids before we started. I'm so grateful for the fact that I can communicate with people, but recognize that there's a lot of hardship there too and challenge. Please.
Hi, my name is Isaac. I, among a handful of other guys attending the talk, are a freshman at the College of St. Joseph the Worker.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes, and so we're here, we're in the town, we're living in houses in the town, we're walking to school every day. We have a lot of energy. We're all very passionate young guys, and being only the second year of students here, we kind of have some influence over what traditions the college has, what are the kind of tropes of the college students who come here.
Absolutely.
Being leaders in the college. And I'm just wondering, what are some small things that we can do as a student body to make sure that our 4 years here are fruitful and that we inspire generations of students at this college being fruitful for the town?
You're asking me a bigger question than I can answer. Because I feel like you're saying, I have this period of time in my life, how do I not waste it? And I feel it would be disingenuous for me to answer, because I don't know your heart. Like, I don't know what you're good at. I don't know what you're passionate about. I think if you pushed me to answer, I would say that's where I would start. The idea of the 4-step process that I went over, it matches humility in a lot of ways with, I don't want to say ability, but like your vision. So if you and me go out and look at something, we're going to sit on the street corner and we're just going to observe. You're going to see something different than me, because you're a different person than me. We have different backgrounds, we have different understandings. And maybe your thing is music, and you look out and you're like, this is missing like a musical chord. Or maybe your thing is art, and you look out and this is so drab, it needs something. And my thing is engineering and planning. I'm like, we need a crosswalk here. The thing is like, we're observing, we're trying to humble ourselves to actually observe our environment, and then we're bringing not like the grand solution, but a little part of the mix to it. And then we're seeing how people respond to it, okay? So what I would say is, take whatever it is that is in your heart, is your passion, is your fellow students' passion. Go out there and go through that exercise and just allow whatever bubbles up to be the thing that you do, and just own it. And I think, if you do that over and over and over again, you might be disappointed with an iteration or two, but you won't be disappointed with the progress you make over the next 3.5 years in school. You won't be. You'll look back at something remarkable you did, and you'll come back here a decade from now and find that it had a lot of value and it's still there, they're still doing it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So go be the leader. Go do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I will go sit out there, and if anyone wants to chat some more, I'm glad to sign books and stay as long as people want to talk. Or as long as they can let us stay in the building. Thank you so much.